You're listening to Always Player One, a solo board gaming podcast.
Hello and welcome to the last episode of Always Player One with me, Scruffy.
And me, Norm. So, the last episode.
The last ever episode. Yes, anyone who picked up our Doomsday announcement, it's finally come around. Our last episode, we're recording it now. I can hardly believe it myself. How are you feeling, Norm?
Yeah, really emotional. Really emotional, actually.
Yeah, I kind of didn't expect to feel quite as intensely emotional as I am feeling right now. So we'll try and soldier through, the two of us, right?
I mean, we've had some time off between now
Yeah.
and back when we announced that it was ending. And I really enjoyed the time off to begin with, but I've really missed, just the stuff that goes into making the show. You know, I've really missed the parts of the process, not all of it. But yeah, I'm feeling emotional because it does feel like the end of something, and you know, we had a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's taken us a long time to actually sit down and record this episode because I think it's really hard to commit to ending something, especially something that you've got a lot of joy from and that is really good. And kind of, I feel like Always Player One, the podcast really has reached a lovely kind of peak and it's ending all of a sudden. And that must be kind of surprising, I think, to some listeners. It must be kind of maybe challenging to understand why it might be happening, and we'll unpick that in this final episode. But there is something to be said for that an ending for something like this can sometimes be a really joyous thing. And the thing I think we both wanted to avoid was for the podcast to kind of just peter out and just miss deadlines and just become something that we were forcing ourselves to do and then not be as good as the episodes that we were making were. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah, it absolutely makes perfect sense. We've left before we identified the reasons we wanted to leave and left before those reasons made us miserable.
Yeah.
I didn't want to ever resent Always Player One. I love Always Player One. It's a joyous thing for me. And it became very difficult for several personal reasons, which, like Scruffy said, we will sort of touch on here. Some of them are, quite personal, but happy to share some little bit of insight with you guys. But, we've identified those reasons and we've made the decision before those reasons had morphed this beautiful thing into something that we would end up resenting. And that would be terrible.
Of course. I mean, I enjoyed recording every single episode with you. I enjoyed editing every single episode. And I really love listening to them. Like, I hadn't really listened to them until, a few here and there, but listening back to them for this episode, it was a really enjoyable experience for me. And it was really nice to see. I've just been listening to the first episode to see kind of where we started and how we ended up kind of developing through the series, and then where we reached the point we got to now, and how the podcast, I think, by doing it, has really enriched both of our experience of trying a new hobby and really opened a door for us in a really nice way. And that's not even to say about the sort of the fallout from stuff you guys listening have given back to us with the Discord and with your just wonderful comments throughout the entire experience. And it would have been a real shame to kind of end things on a sour vibe where just over a period of time the quality of the episodes declined, our spark and passion for the thing wasn't really there anymore, and that would, I think, come through in what we record, and it would cause a rift, I think, between us and you guys.
Yeah, and that's not what we wanted. And I think one of the reasons that people really enjoyed listening to Always Player One is because of our passion. We are very passionate hosts. We don't really hold back. We are very enthusiastic, passionate people when it comes to this hobby. I love this hobby. I'm in love with this hobby.
Yes.
It is, in my opinion, the best hobby in the world. I mean, I haven't tried them all. But I was saying about this on the Discord the other day. I have tried other hobbies, and after, a week, a month, a year, have found my way out of those hobbies and left them for one reason or the other. Not only have I been hobby gaming now for 6 years, but in those 6 years, I haven't really met anyone who's dipped their toe and then gone, this isn't for me. Actually,
Mm.
on reflection, ooh, board gaming's got this horrible dark underbelly that I had to just get out of. And that's really, really rare. It's not a perfect hobby, right? It's not a perfect hobby. And I think, our little community over in the Discord is a very welcoming space, but it's not always like that. But by and large, it is so much more positive than other communities I've been a part of. I'm thinking things like video gaming, for example.
Oh yeah.
It's it's a lovely hobby. I adore it. I love it. And yeah, the last thing I would want is for that passion, just to bring it back around to what I was talking about. The reason you guys tune in is for our love and passion of the hobby. The last thing I would want is for you to stop listening because that passion has diminished due to problems we were experiencing in the process of making the show that we have failed to recognize, and we have failed to sort of quit while we're ahead. So I'm glad
Yes.
that we're making an ending, and this is a positive thing for you guys to go back. You can still enjoy everything we've made before, and you can still take part in Discord. And I am, if not, I think more active on there now than what I was even when we were making the show. you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Sorry, that
and
was really meandering, wasn't it, Scruffy?
well, this is going to be a bit of a meandering episode, isn't it? Because we're dealing with a lot of complicated stuff here, and you're absolutely right that we've always, throughout this entire thing, said if nothing else, we're going to be honest about the games we enjoy, the games we don't enjoy, the mechanics we enjoy, the mechanics we, and our journey in general. And I think with that honesty, you need to be very mindful. And I think forcing ourselves to carry on doing the podcast when it wasn't working for us for whatever reason would have been disingenuous, whatever that word is, and it would have made for just a bad time all around, right? It would have been very difficult to bring the passion that we have for the hobby when we were sort of became aware that the podcast might be actively, the process of recording it might be actively getting in the way, which it wasn't doing for all the other episodes for the show. I mean, like I say, I think the podcast was, for every episode that we recorded, a means to, for at least one of us, but usually both, experience a game in a way that we wouldn't normally, that the fact that we experienced the game when we wouldn't normally, and in a way that it kind of enriched the experience for us and told us something about ourselves, a bit more about the game and kind of why it felt interesting or where it felt problematic, and then being able to, as was always the mission statement, kind of open that up even more and explore it. I found just the conversations in the podcast really enriching and enlightening, and I would be really upset to have lost that, but to carried on and turned into kind of maybe a more kind of forced review-esque podcast, which I never wanted Always Player One to be.
Yeah, I think really well said. And we can revisit the reasons why it's ending in a moment. But I think first, we did say that this was going to be a celebration. So
Yes.
we've got all of that out of the way for now. We can always revisit that later. But let's celebrate then, Scruffy. Let's crack open the champagne. And you mentioned you've been going back and listening to some of the former episodes. I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you about, Always Player One, what it was to you, and we can sort of open it up as a discussion. One of the things I want to say is in episode 18, we did sort of a review of 2020. In episode 18, we did a look back at all of our favorite episodes of 2020 and how it was for us as podcast hosts. So I kind of want to very quickly just ask you, if you had to do that now for 2021 and all the episodes we've done, post episode 18, what have been some of your highlights?
Well, that is such a good question, and I can't wait to hear your highlights as well. I think 2021 was a really amazing year in terms of, we had such incredible guests on in 2021.
Yeah.
We had Sean Tompkin, we had Deborah from Geek Gamers, we had Brandon from formerly from Solosaurus, and
We had James Bradley.
yes, of course, we had James Bradley on for Civitas Nihilium. I think it was really, really exciting to get so many different voices on the show, and I really enjoyed those episodes. I found them to be really enriching, really interesting. I'm going to shine a special light on the Scarlet Heroes episode just because I have listened to it so many times now. I keep going back to listen to it to give me more. Whenever I'm kind of floundering with my solo RP, I will look up Deborah's video on YouTube, the videos on YouTube, and I will listen to that episode because I feel like the stuff that she says about the importance of the different resources, the generative, restrictive, suggestive, and the rubric, that they really help to remind you of the basics and what's important. And I think that Deborah's amazing with that. In almost all of her videos, that's kind of the undercurrent running through it is like, how do you solo RP? And it's a really gnarly, difficult question. So for me, I would say the Scarlet Heroes episode was a massive one. But I could just pick any of these. They were all great. The Lost Ruins one as well. The game was so good. Brandon was amazing on it. And I also want to say that for me, kind of taking those lessons from Deborah, and then we did an episode after that, episode 30, Blades in the Dark, and we kind of just we tried to apply all of that. We did the episode with Deborah where we kind of went to solo RP school, and then for episode 30, that was kind of us trying to flourish on our own. And for me, that was a really challenging episode to prepare for, but really, really fun and really, really good. And I think the stuff that we talk about in that episode is really exciting and really good. I really enjoyed talking about it. So if I had to pick, can I have two? Can I have those ones as my massive highlights? What about you?
Well, I'd like a chance to build on what you've said before I go into my personal highlights, because actually that's a big crossover, because I think the way Deborah approaches solo role-playing was so unique to me as somebody who learned how to solo role-play through Ironsworn. What it made me realize, and it didn't happen immediately after the episode, it sort of came from applying those rules that she mentioned consistently and becoming a better soloist when it comes to role playing. And the more I've played solo role playing games, and the more I've built up my generative, suggestive, my rubric, and my restrictive resources, and become better at applying those into my own games, the more I kind of understand where she's coming from. So I mentioned, obviously, I come from the school of Ironsworn. That's where that's where I learnt my trade, Gov. It made me realize that Ironsworn is very good at teaching you how to solo roleplay, because perhaps the reason why Deborah knows all of this is because she has to. She didn't learn from Ironsworn. She's been solo role playing for a much longer time than us, right? And we've spoken about how some other systems aren't as handholdy for the soloist. I mentioned in the Scarlet Heroes episode that if you hadn't played a solo role playing game before, or indeed any role playing game before, and soloing Scarlet Heroes was your first experience, perhaps it might be a bit of a boring affair because you don't know how to GM for yourself, whereas Ironsworn obviously, and Starforge even more so, has those kind of prompts. The resolution mechanisms are about prompting the story going forward because there isn't a GM to do that for you. And where am I going with all this? The more I've kind of applied what Deborah has taught me, the more in the background the rubric has become. And I still use Ironsworn mostly when I solo roleplay. That is the game I solo roleplay the most, and I'm really, really enjoying my campaign at the moment. But the skills that I've developed from sort of applying Deborah's teachings have improved my gameplay so much. And the sort of rubric of Ironsworn has become less is resting upon the shoulders of it.
Yeah.
I can give it so much more. I still think it is the best system that I've played for the soloist because that resolution mechanic will give you a springboard into those additional resources that I have and those additional skills that I've developed. But regardless of that, I feel like I could solo anything now. I still have, like I said, the preference for Iron Swan, but I do feel like I could solo roleplay anything. And those skills that I've developed and those additional resources that I've managed to pick up have only been because of, the solo role-playing community at large, and somebody like Deborah, who we've spoken to, who has not come from the School of Iron Swan, have their hand held, have had to go through the School of Hard Knocks and be a GM for themselves in systems that aren't at all meant to be soloed. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think in this episode we're going to be talking about games that we didn't get around to covering with the show that we'd love to have covered. And I'm going to just throw out one game that I've played solo, kind of off the back of this. Continuing, we did Scarlet Heroes, we did Blazing Zark, and then after that, I've done two more RP games without a GM. One solo, which I did Forbidden Lands, and I had a lot of fun with, and I applied all those same lessons that we learned from the Scarlet Heroes conversation and all the discourse around it, and are attempting to turn Blades in the Dark into a solo RP game. But I've also, with my partner, we've both been playing Kids on Brooms without a GM, and it's a very similar experience to playing solo. And I've just been having the most fun I've ever had with RP ever. It's so enriching and so good. And it's absolutely right, because what Deborah says in that episode, which you alluded to there, Norm, is she says that the rubric is often the last thing you'll consider. The other three things are really important: finding generative, suggestive, and restrictive resources, which are much more general, oracles and things that can be used in any game system, in any world, in any theme. And I think once you kind of realize that and get the hang of that, the door opens and the worlds of possibilities are endless. And I can't wait to see where I am in another year's time from all of that. But I feel like, unless there's anything else you'd like to add on the RP front.
No, I just want to thank you for making the exact point I was trying to make, but in a much more concise and clear manner.
Yeah, that's quite all right. That's always player one, right?
That is indeed always player one.
I'm only teasing. I think often I'm the one who rambles and you're the one who has to sum up what I said so that everyone can understand. Be the scruffy translator. Yeah?
I'll have to go back and listen again, because that's not my memory. But some of my highlights of 2021, obviously we've already said one of them, and I've been solo role playing a bunch recently, so that's why it's sort of fresh in my mind. So I'd be remiss not to say that Sean Tompkin coming onto the show,
of course,
was a massive highlight. Obviously, I've already alluded to the fact that it's still my favorite role-playing game to play solo, and perhaps even my favorite role-playing game in general. And to have the designer of your favorite game come on to your show, that's not something that a lot of people get to say. It was pretty
no,
cool.
I think it probably comes across in the episode how much I'm gushing. I probably used the word gushing in the episode. I haven't listened to it very recently, so I don't remember. It was a bit of a kind of, it's hard to describe when you kind of meet someone that you've got so exalted in your mind. It was quite overwhelming, I think is the word.
And the fact that they were a lovely person, they're now on the Discord, and just a really cool member of the community, the Always Player One community now, and that's awesome. So that was a big highlight, I think, as well. The Too Many Bones episode. I went back. I went back and listened to the Too Many Bones episode, and I realized how positive I am in that episode, actually. And I think it's kind of been warped in both of our minds because you were so obviously negative in that episode. And because I agreed with the points you were making, because I do believe Too Many Bones isn't a perfect game, and I think there are issues in the system, and I've already spoken about that, and I'm not going to rehash any of that material here. But because I agreed with some of the points you were making, we sort of have it warped in our minds that we were both sort of negative about it. And when I included it in my top 5 solo games of all time, you were surprised. And I was thinking, well, maybe I was really negative. So I went back and listened to it, and I was like, hold on. I'm actually really positive about the game. All I say is how much fun I had playing it, and how much I liked the dice mechanisms, and how much I enjoyed the sort of sprawling adventure that you'd sit down and play. And it's kind of, and if you're a listener who has thought the same thing that we were thinking that it was an episode full of negativity, go back and listen and keep an ear out for what Norm's saying, because actually it's surprisingly positive, and I really like Too Many Bones.
Yeah, I found that a really challenging episode because I much prefer being positive about games, and with that one, I just really rubbed me the wrong way, didn't it? So that one for me was always going to be one I found difficult. Games that I've had the most fun with and enjoyed the most, like Lost Ruins of Arnak, and any pick a game, but those are episodes that I feel more kind of warmly towards because I see the title and I associate all my experiences playing the game with that. But yeah, I can see that it was mainly me kind of painting it and retroactively painting it as a negative episode. That's so funny.
And another highlight for me would be episode 20, where you covered Clans of Caledonia without me.
Oh yes.
The reason that was a highlight is because it was the first episode that I wasn't in, and there was one more that I wasn't in as well, and I learned a lot about what Always Play One could be. Like it doesn't need to be the same thing forever and ever. It can evolve where our opinions evolve, and it was something as simple as you and Kendall read the responses, the listener responses together, and I was like, that is just so much better. Why don't we do that? And
yeah,
it was such a nice experience. I thought that I might feel when I listened to it a little bit jealous, a little bit like, oh, this is my thing, you know. But I didn't. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the fact that it was so well recorded. Kendall did such a good job. And I liked that I guess the reason it's a highlight for me is because my response to that was positive. It feels like, I don't know, maybe an area of growth, you know? It would have been very easy for me to have been immature, that it was an episode that was recorded that I wasn't in. But I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it made me happy to know that I'm the kind of person that is happy for my friends rather than concerned about myself. So that's probably a reason why it's a highlight for me. Does that make any sense?
Oh, that's really lovely to hear, and I really enjoyed that episode as well. I thought Kendall was really good in it, and we covered some really interesting topics. And it did feel very different talking to Kendall to talking to yourself, obviously, Norm. But not to say better or worse,
Of
just
course.
different,
Yeah,
you know.
different.
And yeah, I think that's really cool as well. That it, like you say, it was a different show. It was in a different direction. We ended up doing the listener questions different, but even just the discourse and the kind of content was a different thing. And I think that was one of the reasons that we decided to bring in so many other voices for the year, because we wanted to see where else Always Player One could go. We wanted to kind of shake things up a bit, right?
Yeah,
Like that
absolutely.
we'd done such a lot of our show just the two of us, and it was like, well, let's bring in some other voices. Let's see what happens when we rock the boat. And I think it was a really fun and enjoyable experience to do, and I'm really glad we did, because we got so many cracking episodes out of it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to shout out Brandon as well, because Brandon
Yeah.
was incredible. That recording of that episode is the most additional content that we had to cut out. There was like, I don't know, 30 minutes of talking about role-playing games that didn't make the episode because it wasn't at all relevant, but we just couldn't stop talking.
Yeah. It was amazing talking to somebody who had also been a podcast host, because obviously it was, fish in water, like it was like, yeah, this is just what I'm used to doing. And, they've done episodes just by themselves before. So it was like between the three of us, just there was never a silent moment. Like it was constantly all three of us wanting to talk at the same time. And it was really fun to record. It was actually really, really lovely to meet Brandon, and that, we all just got on so well. And yeah, it was a really lovely episode for sure.
Yeah, it felt like a kindred spirit, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely did. So that was another highlight. I'm sure there's probably more that I'm like, every episode's a highlight, right?
Yeah, of course.
Every episode's a highlight.
And I was saying before we started recording, I was saying, can we just, like, for the format of this show, can we just go over every single episode we did and talk about it? Because I really enjoy all our episodes, and I just want to say how I feel about the game now compared to then, and key takeaways from the episode, little highlight moments. But I think we'd just be sat here for...
I think if that was the case, the final episode would be like 35 parts.
Yeah. So we won't do that. We'll refrain from doing that. And if you want to ask about any episodes that you've enjoyed in Discord. If you want to shout out and say, "Oh, was this episode fun to record? Was there anything? Do you still think this about this?" Always just come along to the Discord, even if you've never been in the Discord before and this is the first time you're considering joining the Discord. It's going to be going indefinitely. Even though Always Player 1 is ending, the Discord isn't ending.
Yeah, and it's a lovely community. Okay, I have another question. Can I ask you another question, Scruffy?
Of course.
Okay, so out of all the games that we played for the show, which ones have influenced your life outside of the show the most?
I would say, and it's feeding a fed horse at this point, the the episode that really kind of had the biggest impact on me, my gaming, and my perception of what you can do within solo gaming as a general thing was just deciding to do the Ironsworn game. I didn't expect it to happen the way it did. I came to you with, "Oh, here's a cool RP system I like the look of. I know we usually do board games, but could we maybe look at doing this for an episode?" And I did not expect it to lead to what it did. It's the thing that has kind of, it feels like it's opened up a whole new hobby. I've said it so many times. It's opened up a whole new hobby to me, even beyond solo board gaming, which I thought we were, I was listening to the Feast for Odin episode. I had no idea we were going to hit on role-playing games. And yeah, it's changed my perception of how you can engage with games and how you can make fun for yourself. And also, I think it's beyond just being a game. It's kind of like being able to kind of have a space to imagine and have that kind of working your brain out in that way. It's made me feel like a more creative person. And I know that might sound a bit conceited or weird, but that's genuinely how it's made me feel. So in terms of my sense of self, I think that's the thing that's enriched me the most.
Absolutely.
How about for you?
I think I would agree. I think Ironsworn is the game that we hadn't played. There are others that, like Mage Knight, has had a huge influence on my life. But I played Mage Knight before we did the show.
Yeah.
It was already around. So maybe I'll talk about Mage Knight in a moment. But just to build on what you've said already, Scruffy, not only has it made me interested in a whole new hobby, but it's also taught me how to be a better GM.
Yeah.
It's enabled me to explore my own role-playing preferences without group interference. I re-listened to the Ironsworn episode because I knew we'd be talking about it a lot today. I re-listened to it recently, and one of the things I said is what I loved about role-playing before I played Ironsworn was the group aspect. It's the collaborative storytelling process, and that still stands when playing multiplayer. But one thing you gain when you remove the group is the sort of noise, it's the interference, it's the sort of distraction, almost. How many times have you played a group role-playing game and someone says, "Okay, now I want to flirt with the dragon," and it's dumb and it makes you laugh as a group and it's funny, but it doesn't teach you anything about your preferences as a player or your preferences as a GM. And through playing Ironsworn, it's allowed me to think that there are systems that are out there that are more finely attuned to my preference. Because before it was all about the setting for me. It was all about the setting. So it enriched my life in that way. It also made me a better GM and a better player. And I would say also probably a better teacher for role-playing games. Now that I understand what I want. I mean, since playing Ironsworn, I have ran a small mini campaign of Blades in the Dark with yourself and others. And you've played in, I think, all of my role-playing games that I've GM'd, Scruffy. I don't think I can get rid of you, to be honest.
Sorry about that.
And I hope that you noticed that I certainly felt that there was a lot of growth between, like my Star Trek Adventures campaign and then my Blades in the Dark campaign. And I think you can put it down as pre and post Ironsworn. I think it is that big an impact. What would you tend to agree?
Yeah, I think it really opened a door for us, didn't it? And it really, yeah, I mean, that's why we keep talking about it. That's why we keep mentioning it, and why we keep coming back to other RP systems like we did the Wretched, because it's had a profound impact on both our experiences with gaming. And I think I would say maybe a part of that is that we had to get over the initial barrier to be able to play it. That it is such a difficult commitment in the same way that solo board gaming was. I remember listening to the Feast for Odin episode. It was really interesting to hear us talking about how it felt a bit kind of maybe silly, we felt a bit shy to be playing solo board gaming. And I think we had a similar epiphany when we played a solo RPG, you know? And it was really interesting that it was kind of just the next logical step for us there, that we were finding solo board gaming and finding our kind of confidence with solo board gaming. And then we had to do it all over again with solo RPs.
Yeah, and it's very fun that journey is recorded and
Yeah.
documented for everybody to listen to. I want to touch on Mage Knight because obviously everybody knows it's my favorite solitaire board game to play. There are other games that I enjoyed playing solo before I played Mage Knight. I really enjoyed playing Mansions of Madness solo. I really enjoyed playing Caverna solo. And I really enjoyed playing Feast for Odin solo. And we talk about that in the Feast for Odin episode, that it's one of our first solitaire games. But Mage Knight was kind of the board game that made me think, yes, I am a solitaire gamer, right? I'm happy to play in groups and I'm happy to play solo, but some people will play games solo and they'll be like, oh, but I'm not a solo gamer. Whereas Mage Knight made me embrace that identity. And I don't think if we hadn't played Mage Knight, if we both didn't love Mage Knight, Always Player One wouldn't exist without Mage Knight.
Yeah, I agree.
So I can't say, if I'm going to talk about how Ironsworn impacted my life and changed it, I also have to talk about Mage Knight, because Mage Knight literally put my life into a different direction. We wouldn't have started this show without it, I don't think.
Yeah, and I want to bring up on Mage Knight. We did a second episode on it. We did episode 24, which was in the 2021. And in that episode, we talked about something which I think is really important in the randomness, and that my journey with randomness changed through the series. And I think a big part of that was learning to appreciate it in other games, but also it all culminated. I think I mainly spoke about it in that Mage Knight episode with Kendall, that I realized that for a solo game, randomness is actually a really useful tool and very joyous and enjoyable experience for me now. Even though at the start I was really trepidatious about it. I started in Feast for Odin saying, well, you were saying, well, I'm more forgiving of randomness than you, Scruffy. And I was like, well, I don't like randomness. It's raw. And I was very, very much a stickler for games to have very little, especially output randomness, as we. I won't rehash that old conversation. But if you're interested in kind of randomness in solo gaming and you haven't heard our Mage Knight deep dive, check it out there, because we really do unpack it quite a lot. And I think it was the coalescence for me of realizing that my preference has entirely kind of almost done a 180 almost, and I really appreciate randomness in games now. And that's actually made me much more forgiving of games, not only solo but multiplayer, that have random elements. Yeah, it was a really fascinating experience, and that came about through this podcast.
And if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about randomness in games, but not just randomness, but other uncertainty in games, one of the tools that really opened my eyes on how important uncertainty is in games is the book called Uncertainty in Games. So this book is by Greg Kostikyan. It is available through Amazon, like everything in the world is. It's a really, really interesting read, and it touches on not just randomness, but uncertainty in games in general. One of the reasons why randomness we find to be super engaging when it comes to solo gaming is because board games need an element of uncertainty for them to even be games, right? Otherwise, why would you play? It's what you're trying to overcome is this sort of uncertain elements. That, can I do this thing? And the answer isn't obvious at the start. If it is, why would you play? Can I win this game? Can I do this? how will I do this? If the answer was obvious, you wouldn't sit down to play. So the uncertain elements are what make it compelling. And solo gaming misses out on one of the most engaging parts of uncertainty, which is player uncertainty. When you're playing with other players, you don't know what they're going to do. And randomness, when it's implemented in a sophisticated fashion, like it is in Mage Knight, can really make you forget that the game you're playing has no player uncertainty. It can really help mitigate that feeling of missing out because you still have that, can I do this? Can I complete the game? Will I be able to? What cards will end up in my deck in Mage Knight?
Yeah.
What skills am I going to come across? What units am I going to encounter? What adventure am I about to have? And it's the random elements that make that so compelling and make you forget that actually you're playing a game that doesn't have any player uncertainty. No one else is going to change the board state other than yourself. And the reason you're able to forget that is because of how well the design implements random elements. And I'm so glad that you've come around on it as well, Scruffy, because it's great. And I can't recommend that book enough. It's a really, really fascinating read. They detail these 7 different areas of uncertainty, which I won't dive into here. It's a much, much bigger topic, but really, really hard recommend.
Yeah, I think it all started for me though with our episode 6. Actually, that this is when the kind of cracks began to form, which was the roads and boats episode. And in that, there isn't like any randomness, like barely, as the tiny bit you could say with the mines as you pull out the the gold or the iron, right?
Actually, in a solo experience, those for some reason are not randomized. When you pull the mines out, remember, it always comes out one then the other,
Oh
one then
yeah.
the other.
So it is entirely deterministic. You could not play the game. You could sit and work it out, without actually having to play the game. It's the same. We've hinted on a few times. We haven't actually done an episode on it, but we've hinted on Caverna
Hmm.
and why I don't like that. And that kind of made me realize, well, maybe I do like some randomness. And we in lots of episodes it came up like maybe I like some randomness. And then I just had another turn that it wasn't just some randomness. I like most randomness now, and I think it comes from a place of how I frame solo games, and that my framing of solo games has changed from caring more about winning and getting a high score to caring more about the journey and having a story come out of the game. I don't really mind anymore whether I win or lose a solo game. And I think this is something that we hit on a lot in some of the episodes this year. And I suppose, even earlier episodes where we were talking about how we approached games and what made them more or less fun. And maybe maybe the reason we didn't enjoy that game is because we approached it with the wrong attitude. And, it could be that if I were to play Too Many Bones now, for example, I'd enjoy it a bit more because I wouldn't be as concerned about victory and as irked by the game not letting me win and not rewarding me for good play. But who knows? Maybe that's something that could have changed.
Yeah, like for example, this is really evident even in our multiplayer games. There's been like a time now where COVID sort of settled down a little bit in the UK. It's obviously the numbers are way back up now. But there was a time where it was deemed safe to meet and to game, and we took advantage of that. And quite recently, we played Western Legends. And Western Legends is just a sandbox multiplayer adventure game,
Yeah.
and we were the biggest advocates for the randomness around the table.
Right.
I remember one player said, "Oh, so in one turn, I just now own all the money that I'm allowed in the game. I just maxed out." And I was like, "Isn't it exciting? you know,
Yeah.
isn't it great?"
Yeah. It fit the theme so well. I think it was the perfect kind of culmination of that because the game is just such a you just got to do cool cowboy shit, and hope to win.
Absolutely, it's just like a rootin' tootin' good time, and
Exactly. Yeah, I said hope to win. I didn't even mean hope to win. Not even hope to win. You just got to hope to have a good time. Hope to be the most coolest cowboy around.
but of course you did win.
Of course I won. Okay, my turn to ask you a question, I think now.
Okay.
People listening might be wondering, what games that we kind of wish we'd covered and So I just want to ask you if there've been any games that you've been playing that you haven't been able to get to for the show. Any games that you've been enjoying solo, and maybe just want to give a kind of, not, we don't want to dive into a massive whole episode for each of the games, but just some games that you've been enjoying that you kind of wish you had the chance to cover right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things I've noticed for me recently is I've really been already starting to get my feet wet. I was about to say diving into, but I'm going to change that to getting my feet wet with solitaire war games. We've noted on the show before that I'm more interested in that topic than yourself, Scruppy, but that has been something that's come about again because of the show and because of sort of community interest. The more that I know the solo community as a result of this show, the more sort of exposure I've had to these games. And recently, where I've had time away from the show, it's been interesting to note that I've been reaching for a lot of solitaire war games. So the first game I've played that was a war game was Stilicho, The Last of the Romans.
Hmm.
And this is a sequel to The Wars of Marcus Aurelius, which is a game that we've covered on the show. This is a really well-made sequel because it does what, we've said what good sequels should do, which is build on the successes of the previous game, but integrate sort of more interesting mechanical parts and, a different story. One thing I love about, or I've learnt to love about war games, especially recently, is how the design isn't so much fussed on making something that is perfect in terms of player agency or depth of decision space. It's much more interested in framing the rules around the challenges that it's trying to show you an historical figure would have had. So Stilicho, for example, the turn tracker or the round tracker goes in years, and the third round is 408 AD. Now the game is much, much longer than that, but 408 AD is when Stilicho died. He was captured and killed.
Okay.
So that really frames for me how difficult this game is supposed to be. First time I played, I died in 409, and I was like, well, I'm officially better than Stilicho, but I still died on the fourth round.
Wow. Yeah.
And it sort of makes you think, yes, like what this game is trying to show me, it's not so much fussed about creating a perfect space where you're always going to get to the final round and it's always going to come down to 1 or 2 points. And some Euro games are very concentrated on that. You play a multiplayer Euro game and you both go for divergent strategies and they're both equally good. They're both equally fine strategies, and you finish up like 5 points away from each other and you go, oh, wasn't that a really close game? And it's sort of designed so that you can't really have a bad time playing it.
Hmm.
And I think where I am with games at the moment is I'm quite interested in games that kind of buck that and say, you know what, much more interested in sort of displaying to you what the sort of landscape of this history was like. And that's very interesting to me. And as a soloist, where I don't have to worry about other players' feelings about that, it's really a perfect medium, I think, for that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I feel like that sort of thing works really well when you're playing solo, doesn't it? And it's what I was saying about not caring about whether you win, the kind of the framing you come into a game with, where if you're playing with another person or a group of people, then you kind of want to all play the game to completion and have a kind of a moment, a good time, to it's why player elimination is kind of really risky in board games. But when you're playing solo, player elimination is just the game ends prematurely, and that can work really well and can be quite fun, can't
And
it?
it's a story. It's a story.
Yeah.
The fact that I died so close to when the real Stilicho died, and it was the same game trigger. I was captured and I was beheaded,
Hmm.
and it was exactly how Stilicho met his fate. And I thought that was really neat. And I only played it once, but it felt different enough to the Wars of Marcus Aurelius, yet familiar in all the ways that I wanted it to. So yeah, that was good, and yeah, that's something that if we had this space to do more episodes, I would definitely want to speak about something like that. What about? And there's a couple more. I've had long enough. What about you, Scruffy?
Yeah, so luckily for me, my partner has got into board gaming. So I've been playing a lot of games, and she is particularly interested in co-op games, which are obviously usually soloable. So I've had a real treat playing a bunch of games. We've got ourselves a copy of Marvel Champions, which we've already covered for the show, obviously, but I'm learning how
Can I
much more
stop you there?
fun.
Can I stop you there?
Go
Can
on.
I have like a formal announcement that you were wrong, right? Because
What did I
In the
say?
Marvel Champions episode, you said I play on tabletop sim because I find the business model abhorrent, and now
Okay, look, I still think it's overpriced for what it is. But now that I'm in it and I'm doing the collection and I'm, looking at hero packs and we've got some of the big box expansions, I can really see how it's very exciting, isn't it? And actually, the way the deck building works is very different to a lot of their other LCGs, where you don't have enough copies of the cards to make a coherent deck. In Marvel Champions, you're only allowed like one card of a named character, for example. So you only need one copy of that card. They're unique. And the ones that you can have multiple copies there are enough to go around. The way the aspects work, I haven't felt, even though I have been doing, a bit of constructing the decks and mixing things around, I haven't once felt like, oh, I wish I had more of this card,
yeah, I
because
think
you've got
Marvel
enough.
Champions is absolutely the most casual of all of them, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
it's casual not just in the way it plays, but in the way you can arrange your collection. I've seen so many people online say the way I play Marvel Champions is I just buy the heroes I'm interested in. You
Yeah,
could not do that with the other ones. With Arkham Horror,
no,
you if you buy the big box expansion, then you then need to buy the 6 other mini expansions that come after it because they continue the story.
yeah,
Same with Lord of the Rings LCG, although they are re-releasing those now, and they are doing the sort of Marvel Champions thing where the boxes are bigger. The base game of Arkham Horror now is enough for 4 players, for example, where it wasn't before.
hmm
You can buy whole cycles in just big boxes. I'm really looking forward to the Lord of the Rings new revised base set. I'm basically just going to jump back in as a new player and just buy whatever they feel like re-releasing in this new, friendlier business model compared to what it has been. That's for sure.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. But yeah, I totally, I get where you were coming from when you were saying it in the episode now, and kind of asterisk next to my outspoken opinions, I guess, on that episode. I do still think, like I say, that it's a slightly high price tag, but it's fun. Like when you're doing it, it's really quite fun, and it's really easy to, like you say, have a casual approach to deck building. It's not a complex deck builder. You don't have as much freedom as you do with the other LCGs like the Lord of the Rings one, or if you're used to constructed games like Magic the Gathering or whatever, where you can create all sorts of wild and wonderful decks. In Marvel Champions, you basically have a set of 15 cards that you must include for the hero. Then anyway, we talked about all this in the episode, but then you have the aspects that you can sub in and out, and then some basic cards. It's very
Plug in and play.
broad strokes. Broad strokes. Yeah, you take a handful of cards and chuck them in your deck. And I'm having a blast with that. I know it's not a new game; it's one we've covered on the show, but I feel like my appreciation for it has gone up another level. I will say, if you do get yourself a copy of the game, definitely get yourself a playmat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so much more fun playing it on a playmat. But that's enough advertising Marvel Champions. They don't need us to plug their
No.
product. What else am I playing? Oh, Parks. I was really lucky enough that my partner got me a copy of Parks, and we haven't played it solo yet, so I haven't seen how the automa works. But I can, you can imagine it from a two-player game. It's just the most joyous experience, and it's the first time ever in a game where I had a moment where I could just mess up the other player, not get anything myself, but just mess them up, deny them some points. And you know what? I didn't do it. It was just the game is so relaxing and joyous all the way through. You're just literally going on a walk in the parks, having a lovely time, and picking up these. Oh, the components, Norm. They're wooden water droplets and starbursts. Oh, it's so satisfying. And the cards, every single card has kind of linen finish. Oh, it's a tactile treat, and it's very, very enjoyable indeed, that one. So that's been another really big, exciting discovery for me, for sure. But you give me another one of yours, Norm. I'm sure you've got a few more up your sleeve that you've been playing.
Yeah, so I've started to dip my toe into The Hunters, German U-boats at war 1939 to 43, I think.
I love that we're just going from a nice walk in the park to German warboats.
This is in the sort of same series as Silent Victory, which I know you played and detested, I think, right?
Yep.
But I had an absolute blast. I don't know if it was from playing the physical version rather than playing on Tabletop Simulator, but I sat there and I felt like there was such a nice performative connect between what my role was in the game and what my role was in real life. I was sat there with my sort of, submarine in front of me, my sort of targets lined up, my little radar token, and then my little log sheet. Any game where you actually have to write something down, on pen on paper, always feels like an extra treat to me. And yeah, I felt like I was in my office. I was in my war room. I was in my captain's ready room with
Oh, nice.
everything in front of me. And the gameplay is mostly just, in fact, is almost entirely just roll for a random encounter
Yep.
and then have a random encounter or don't.
Yep.
And I was obsessed. Like I couldn't believe how joyful it felt to play. And again, it does the same thing that Stilicho does and all these other war games do, where the gameplay is all about framing what that historical event might have felt like in terms of the challenges, in terms of the tactics, in terms of what they might have been feeling or thinking. I think it's a really safe way to bring what is quite an unpleasant part of history to life in a way that is respectful, educational, and fun. I went to bed that night when I finished playing and I couldn't stop thinking about the game. And it wasn't the gameplay, because, like I said, it's just rolling on random tables, but it was a space that it allowed my brain to enter for the time that I was playing. I thought it was remarkable. Yeah, really, really remarkable. And I can't wait to play again. I'll tell you the story, right? What happened is I was playing to learn the game. This was before GMT did their sort of 2-column format, so it was tiny text in 3 columns on every page, which made it a real pain to learn because it is a really ridiculously simple game. It shouldn't be so hard to learn.
Yes.
So I was sort of sat down with the rulebook and playing with the rulebook as I went. So it took me quite a long time. I did about 11 months worth of patrols, and that took me about 2 hours. I think that might get faster as I play again. And I was like, right, I'm going to break now. I've been playing for 2 hours. So I put my pen and paper down, I put everything down, and I left it set up on the table. The next day I sat down and I said, right, I got about 2 hours before I need to get on with any work or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly run through the hunters. And 4 dice rolls later, I died. And I was like, that makes me like the game even more.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I was like, oh, that is so perfect. I rolled for an air encounter. I got an air encounter. I rolled to crash dive. I didn't crash dive successfully. So I said, okay, well, what attack are they going to do? 1 attack plus an injured crew member. Right, fine. What crew member is it? Oh, it's me specifically because I'm a person in the game. It's me. Oh no. Am I lightly wounded? Am I severely wounded? Or am I killed in action? Roll. I'm killed in action. That's it. GG. Put the pen and paper down. You are dead. And I think, even when I was forgiven of randomness at the start of our journey, I think if that happened to me at the start, I would have put it all back in the box and never played it again. But it just made me, I laughed out loud when it happened. And I just think that's where I am at the moment. So yeah, I've been playing the Hunters a lot. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that might be even still. It's a little bit too much. I guess I'd call it like arbitrary randomness for me.
Yeah.
But maybe not. I mean, I haven't played it since my epiphany, so maybe I'd really enjoy it. I think the main reason I can't get into those sort of games, and I think probably maybe any war games, especially playing them solo, is the thing that you love about it and that makes it joyous for you, which is that it's based on real events and that you're able to kind of learn about those events and feel enriched by that. Personally, I find that really distressing, and I can't I just remember reading the kind of the names of the literal names of the boats that were names tied to actual boats that existed that I was sinking in Silent Victory. And I just felt miserable thinking about it. Like my empathy kicked in and I couldn't enjoy it. But I guess that's just a taste thing or who knows what.
And yeah, like I said, and we discussed this in episode 4 when we discussed This War of Mine, is that there are many Euro games based on real events that are abstracted to a level that the theme almost isn't important. And that's, in my opinion, almost worse because although it's safer for the player, not as triggering for the player, by kind of ignoring the difficult things that come along with history, I think it's setting kind of disrespectful tone. You know, when you play games that are about, you know, colonizing, and there are many of them. There's a
Yeah, yeah,
fascination. There's a like a fetish in this hobby,
yeah.
and especially in the Euro space, for taking what is a terrible something that happened that was, you know, deeply traumatic and in some cases genocidal and terrible into a point salad. And that kind of feels worse than something like the
Yeah,
Hunters.
yeah.
And we've spoke about that in episode 4, so I don't really want to sort of open that whole can of worms, but I just think that's an interesting observation, isn't it? That people are quite happy to play, you know, Puerto Rico, a game about owning plantations. But then they'll say things like, I struggle with war games because it's based on real events. And I think, no, have a word with yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that, and it's not to say when I say that I find it problematic that it is bad. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't,
yeah.
you know, it's an interesting conversation, but I certainly do think that games like Puerto Rico, which don't kind of invite you to empathize, invite you to engage with the reality of the situation in the way that this War of Mine or war games do, that I think those games are objectively more problematic and more objectionable, even though I find them more comfortable to play myself. And maybe, like you say, because I find them more comfortable to play myself, it's just that I'm, you know, I find the games like Silent Victory very uncomfortable to play.
It's just an interesting observation, isn't it? It's certainly a topic that has been brought up a lot in the board game arena, but also a topic that is still relevant because there's still, you know, Alexander Pfister's Maracaibo is an extremely popular game which came out in 2019, right? Like, do we still need games about colonization in 2019?
It does feel a bit like wish fulfillment, doesn't it?
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. And I'm not having a go at people who enjoy these games, right? I have Mombasa. I really enjoy the gameplay, the mechanisms, and I appreciate the design element. So that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just pointing out that there's an interesting sort of dichotomy there, you know, where there's these war games which much more people feel uncomfortable playing, and yet there's these Euro games which you could make an argument for are actually indeed slightly more problematic. Not that I'm not saying that you shouldn't play them. I'm just sort of pointing out that sort of, I don't know, hypocrisy maybe. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I
interesting.
get what you're saying, Norm, absolutely. And I just want to kind of bring this back to the podcast right now and point out that we did an episode on this War of Mine for episode 4 of the show. Like, that was after we just did the first 2 episodes were like really getting into it. What's the show going to be? Third episode, Mage Knight, obviously. And then episode 4, our first next episode was this really big, expansive topic of problematic games and stuff. I mean, I think in terms of the kind of mission statement for this podcast, we've really held true to it. And even now, when we talk about what games had the biggest impact on us, I think throughout the entirety of Always Player One, what we've been trying to do is kind of tread new ground and push the hobby even to the next step. I mean, the next step after episode 4 we did was print and plays. You know, it was like, well, this is something new we haven't tried, you know. And I really love we've kind of both reached a position with the thing now where we can sit back and be like, look at all these different places we've come, all these different topics we've covered, and also all these different modes of plays that we've covered, because we've just been constantly exploring and kind of seeking out new things, new ways to play, new ways to do things. Almost, I don't know if it was by design or just by accident that we did that. Coin games is another great example that we started to really delve into. You know, we were always kind of looking for the next kind of way to engage with this hobby.
And it's interesting that so many podcasts chase the newest release, the newest popular release. And
Yeah.
I'm proud that we chased instead the newest to us experience, which sometimes
Yeah.
meant playing an older game, which sometimes meant playing not a board game. And I'm really proud of you, the listeners, who have come with us on this journey and have been really forgiving when we're giving our opinions on things that we've only recently encountered.
Yeah.
And if you are new to solo gaming as well, and you started, you know, so many people got into solo gaming because of the pandemic. And at the same time, they were able to join in with us on our journey and go through those same things. And if you have done that, then hats off to you, and you have my utmost respect because that's awesome.
Yeah, I think trying new things and stuff has really been at the heart of this show. And if there's anything you've experienced that's been kind of new to you, or, you know, or whatever, then that's really cool. And taking yourself out of your kind of comfort zone, I think, is a really noble thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, well, you were about to say about something else you've been playing.
Okay, this one's gonna maybe upset at least one of our friends, maybe even you as well. But I played Wingspan. I played Wingspan solo.
Nice. No, that doesn't upset me at all. The reason Scruffy says that is because it's personally not really a game that I enjoy. But
Yeah.
I get it because, you know, I really like birds.
It's got a bit of a stigma in our kind of gaming group, at least. It won a lot of awards, and everyone was like, oh, "It's winning best solo as well." What the hell? Yeah. So it's kind of a bit of a meme, because we all, when we played Wingspan, very lukewarm on it, I think, is the polite way of of saying it. But it's a game that my partner got me to revisit because she absolutely loves the game and got me to learn the automa. And obviously, with my newfound zeal for randomness, it's a game that just kind of thrives on randomness, right? Everything that happens is just like, you got to get lucky with the birds. You know, you can have strategies, you can have tactics, of course, but if one player has luckier bird pulls, there are a few specifics, especially if you just play the base game, that we pulled a few of the birds out. I'm looking at the common raven and the killdeer and their equivalents, because they were just stupid cards that if you got them, you won the game. But that aside, that kind of minor design flaw aside, I found the game really, really enjoyable and really fun. And it goes again to the thing I was talking about parks, the tactility of the thing. You know, actually having the physical copy, the bird feeder, when you roll the dice, when you pick up those lovely eggs. I just am in a bit of a tactile obsession-y place at the moment. And I'm sure I'll talk more about that in a moment with another game that we didn't get around to covering for the show.
That's really interesting. It's nice. It's really nice. And no, I would never get upset. I know you're only joking, of course, but
Yeah, of course, of course.
you know, good, good. I'm glad that you had a good time. Not my
Yeah.
cup of tea personally, but super glad that.
I tell you what, it's probably a lot been as well, is that, you know, games like Parks and this, I've been just wanting to not have to think and just be able to sit down and muck around with some eggs for a bit, rather than pull out Mage Knight and have a 2 hour brain busty deep dive into some clever stuff. You know, I just want to chill. So it's all about the context. It's all about how you approach the game, isn't it? It's all about that kind of framing.
Absolutely. Okay, another one that I've been playing is Field Commander Rommel. Now, Field Commander Rommel is in the Field Commander series by DVG, Down Versing Games, and this is the first DVG game I have played, and I am really, really taken aback by how easy this is to learn compared to a lot of solitaire war games. Dan Versing Games clearly take a lot of effort in making these games as approachable as possible. The rulebook is written like a rulebook for a like a Euro game, and the board or multiple boards that are in this game, because there are 3 different campaigns you can play, and those 3 different campaigns take part on 3 different maps. All have mounted boards, which is amazing. Now, on the boards, there are sequence of play references, turn references throughout, setup reference. When you're using this map, this is how you set up. These are your options for setup. Just you can run down your turn and go step 1 this, step 2 this. It's so procedural that it made it a breeze to get to the table. I purchased that game, and the following day I was playing that game. And that's very rare for me because I'm not the best at learning new systems. I take my time with things. I watch a few playthroughs. I sit down with a rule book and spend a couple of hours sort of doing a learning game. I got this game and I was able to get it to the table and have the rule book pretty much in the box for the whole time. And that made a big difference in how much I enjoyed playing it. I enjoyed it much, much more because it was easy to learn. And a lot of solitaire war games aren't easy to learn. And it does a great job at sort of presenting the challenges that Rommel would have been faced with. It really sort of encourages you to take really brave and bold strategies and act quickly before the allies will eventually outnumber you. You're sort of running on a shoestring amount of supplies compared to the allies who will eventually win. They will eventually win. We know that's what happens, right? So you, in order to be successful, have to be sort of cavalier, and I really appreciate that. That's how this game's designed, and maybe other Field Commander games won't be designed like that. I don't know. I haven't played them, but I thought that this sort of idea, this sort of decision space that you're in, where you're sort of restricted by what happened historically, as I said right at the start of this question that you've asked me, Scruffy, that is something I've been really, really enjoying for solo play. And Field Commander Roll is another great example, and something that I've really enjoyed playing.
Watch this space for Norm's new upcoming solo war game podcast.
What about any other games that you sort of wish you had a chance to cover on the show?
Yeah, okay. So the one last one that I kind of hinted at at the end of my last rant there is obviously Cloudspire, which I played a bunch for the episode that didn't happen. It was the episode that was lined up to happen and didn't happen. So I'm going to just kind of lay out a really kind of whizzed through summary of where I kind of landed on that for anyone who was interested, but I'm not going to go on a huge amount. So I just wanted to talk about that. I enjoyed my time with Cloudspire immensely, despite there being a bunch of rough edges and negatives that I found in the game. For example, the rules are quite fiddly and overcomplicated. There's a lot of minutiae that's not clearly explained in the rule book. I feel like the design for the specific scenarios is very wonky or just outright maybe mistakes. Like one of the first scenarios, it feels like they got a rule wrong or the difficulty's just badly designed. But and when I accidentally played it with the rule as I think it should have been printed. It's to do with the range of one of the towers. I won't get into it, but that was the only time I was able to win that scenario. Could just be that I'm rubbish. I think it's more likely it was a mistake that they didn't correct, but I didn't see anywhere to tell me that online. But all of those negatives were completely, almost entirely made up for just by how joyous the components are. And obviously, anyone who's talked or heard about Cloudspire has heard it a million times. The components are wonderful, like the chips, the neoprene mats. The only thing that's not is there's a deck of cards that are just plastic cards, but you don't have to interact with those. And the reason that's so important is because you will lose, I think, in Cloudspire, and you will lose often in Cloudspire. I think it's the sort of game where you have to just keep kind of bashing your head against the wall against the same scenario. And you can lose turn one. Like if you make a mistake, you go, oh, whoops, that's game over. But then setting it back up is a treat. Like you get to just pick up all the chunks of chips and put them back on the board in their place. You get to feel those tokens and shuffle them around, move them around, and put them on the board. I mean, it's almost as joyous as playing the game for me, setting up, even putting the neoprene mats on the table and laying them out. It feels fun and exciting and enjoyable. And so until Cloudspire, I'd never really quite got so invested and got so much from the components of a game to the point where they were actually making up for problems in the game themselves. Because even if I lost quickly from the janky design, it was made up for by those components. And that's something that I'd never really considered in games before. I always saw them as kind of secondary to the fun. But in Cloudspire, the components really are a lot the fun. And then outside of those, there's other stuff that I enjoy as well. So, for example, the way that a game feels is it kind of feels like a David versus Goliath story where the AI just gets this giant stack of army of chips, and yours is just a meager, tiny little couple of chips by the end of the scenario, especially. And the way that you kind of overcome that obstacle is by using your brain, using your wits, and outsmarting the AI, because the game lets you take the AI's turn for it. And this is the first solo game I've played where the AI doesn't just happen automatically and have resolution conflicts that resolve randomly or by a specific design. Instead, you get to resolve any conflicts in your favor as the player. And that was such a neat experience, because instead of having to get an AI turn out of the way, I found myself when I was playing my turn and then playing my second turn, which was the AI's turn. And the turn I was playing for myself, I was trying to maximize it, get everything eked out just right. And then when I was playing the AI's turn, I was trying to just do a rubbish job. Like, oh, I'll just move this one into here so that they're in a trap. It's very rare that you get to actually influence movement. It is a programmed game. But when you do, it's like, oh, so I'll move them into range of my tower then. And that's a really fun and exciting and kind of impish feeling that I think Cloudspire offers. So yeah, I mean, like I say, I could go on about this for an entire episode's worth, I'm sure, but I just wanted to highlight there that losing is fun when it happens, because the game's so fun to set back up and then try a slightly different approach with your pieces. And that thing of being able to play the AI's turn badly after playing your turn well was a really neat little twist on an automa that I've never experienced before, and was really enjoyable.
Yeah, and I remember when we played one scenario where we lost within the first 2 turns 3 times in a row.
Yep.
And it was so quick. None of us went, oh, I'm sick of this. You know, it was so quick because you're sliding chips across near pre-match, you're like, okay, they go back to their starting position, they go back there, they go back here, go back there. Okay, remove this, remove that. Right, ready to go. Let's start again.
Yeah, and I'll just switch out this unit that I had here for this unit. They might do a better job. And that felt good to do.
Yeah, it felt like sometimes when, like Seventh Continent, for example, the restarting in Seventh Continent, let's say you die and you have to restart. Wow, that's where you kind of go, oh, I wish this was a video game, you know, or I wish this was a choose your own adventure book where I could just flick back to the page that I was on, you know, keep my thumb on the page that I was previously on and just flip back to it and start again. With Cloudspire, it doesn't have that problem because restarting is just like bish bash bosh, job done, let's go again. I've learned something new, let's try again. And trying again is really compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really surprised at the amount of, because a lot of this game is programmed, you know, a lot of, you send out your minions, they go in a certain direction. I was surprised at the small areas where your decisions are life and death.
Mm-hmm.
They are really, really important. And when you make a smart little move where you could move your minion here closer to their target this way or this way, and you choose the one that lets you finally do that thing that you've been trying to, you know, hit or avoid the tower or keeps you alive for an additional round or whatever it is that you've achieved through doing that, it makes you feel very smart.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel really smart. And as well as that, on the other side, it makes you feel really dumb when you get caught out. It makes you feel like, yeah, if I thought about that long enough, I would have seen, because the AI's turn is programmed, I would have seen that. I hadn't seen it. I am now dead. Aren't I an idiot?
But let's just set back up again. I'll grab my chips and grab their chips.
Or if you want to be a little cheeky, let's just retcon that. Let's say I did move there because I would have seen it. You know what? Who cares? You're only playing by yourself, right? And it's still fun. It's still really fun.
Yeah. But on that minutia, though, we did play a bunch of games together where we got one rule wrong, and it wasn't made clear in the book. But it just meant that we kept losing, and it's like, this feels impossible. And it took us through 2 or 3 games to realize, yeah, this is impossible because the rule's wrong. It's like, that just makes me want to throttle them.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, and be aware of that if you are tempted to get Cloudspire. It's one of the most frustrating games in terms of interacting with the rulebook I've experienced in a long time. So it's great fun to set up. It's great fun to play. It's a really lovely game. but it's very frustrating.
I found Too Many Bones a lot easier to learn. If we're going to compare the chip theory games, I found Too Many Bones a lot easier to learn, but Cloud Spy has a lot more depth of decision space. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
I wonder. Sorry, yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. But I just wondering out loud now whether I would have enjoyed my time with Too Many Bones if I'd had the tactility of it. Maybe chip-free games do rely on their components; they are an integral part of the gaming experience, and that's something that I never really considered before playing Cloudspire. And it's something that's kind of maybe even my next step on my journey here of understanding games is that I played a lot of games on tabletop sim for the podcast, assuming it says the next best thing. But I think sometimes that's just not right. I mean, sometimes you need the physical artifact. You need to be able to move the pieces to fully appreciate a game.
It's how they're designed, right? It's like reading
Yeah,
Shakespeare. It's not how it's designed to be done.
yeah,
There's value there, but you're not getting the experience.
Yeah, I think you can get a part of it, but I think, and for some games, you maybe even can get the whole thing. But I think for some games, like playing Cloud Spire on Tabletop Sim, you wouldn't get the same experience. I'm just 100% sure of that. And that's something that I think I'd taken a bit for granted before.
Well, Scruffy, you just say the word. I'll be happy to swing by yours with my copy of Too Many Bones anytime.
I'd love to give it a go, yeah. All right, okay. So what's next, Nom? Any more questions for us to...
Yeah, I know we've been rambling on for a while, but you know what? It's our last episode. Indulge us, please.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a long time talking about the games there, more time than I think we expected, but I hope you guys have enjoyed that. It's like, this is what happens when me and Norm get in a room. We've got a lot of pent up talking about games to do right now, so you're going to have to bear with us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a longie this
Buckle up. Okay, I have a really interesting question. I thought about this, and I don't know how I'm going to answer it. So
Okay.
I'm interested to know what you think.
Shoot.
If we were allowed to break our formula and cover one multiplayer game, give it the always player one treatment, play it lots, give it the in-depth analysis, what multiplayer game would you be most interested in covering?
That is such a good question. 100% without a hesitation, Mantis Falls.
Okay.
It is a 2 or 3 player game. I've only played it 2-player with my partner, and it's a 2-player social deduction game. How does that work? Surely you know if you're the good guy. Well, the great thing about it is you are working together. It's kind of cooperative sometimes. It's a game of trust. So there are 2 roles in the game, witness and assassin. And there are 3 cards, 2 witnesses, 1 assassin, which you deal out between the 2 players. So there's a chance you're both witnesses, both good guys. But there's a chance one of you is not a good guy. And the whole game is you're just walking along, moving your little figures along cards on the board, which are road cards, to get to an endpoint. And if you and the other player gets the endpoint and you're both witnesses, you win the game. The role of the assassin is you win the game if you eliminate the other player, you kill them. And every turn you get these random event cards that just do nasty stuff to you. There'll be adversaries that you have to fight and beat with playing cards from your hand. You and your friend, your cooperative player, and it's very difficult to do alone. And some of the event cards are hidden; they're unseen, and you'll just peek at them yourself. And with those, they'll often have an effect on them. They might be you can assign 2 damage to however you want among the players. And the great thing about that is you don't have to be completely honest with those. So you can just say, the card says you have to take 2 damage. That's really unfortunate. It says the other player takes 2 damage. And you put that in the discard, But if you do that sort of stuff too often, then the witness will kind of realize, wait, this person, my fellow here is definitely the assassin. And especially early on in the game, or anytime they're nearby a phone booth on the board, they actually have the power to just immediately murder you. Like you can, if you're the witness, murder the other player, which is a pretty huge amount of power to have as the witness, as the good guy in a social deduction game. Usually, the power to kill is all with the assassin in the game, right? But it kind of subverts.
Yeah, when you said that, I even thought, Scruffy's made a mistake. He meant to say the assassin.
No.
Wow.
No. So it's totally turned on its head. But obviously, that's a gamble. And if you're the witness and you kill the other player, and they were turned out a witness, and they just had a hard time, rough run of cards that were really horrible cards, or weren't able to help in those situations where you really needed them to help you, you'll lose the game because you can't get both witnesses to the end now, and you'll feel like an absolute jerk for killing your buddy who had your back this whole time and was having a miserable game. And the levels there where it's the most tensely wrapped up I've ever been in a game before. It might not even sound like much to me just giving you the pitch now, but the feelings of kind of claustrophobia, because every game, incidentally, I have been the good guy and my partner has been the assassin. That we've only played twice, but both times felt totally different as well. And both times I was hook, line, and sinker for most of the game, just believing that my partner had my back and was just having a horrible game.
And I think the fact that it's always been that way, there must be the
Mm.
meta as well.
Yes,
Well, what are
yes.
the chances that it would happen again?
But the other thing to say about it is the kind of climax at the end, because you get to the end and you're scraping by. And I got to the end of the second game and I was like, I genuinely don't see a way that we're both going to get to the end now. I'm at the end. I got myself there just because I'd had the betrayal game last game where I got stabbed in the back. And I was like, I can't see how I can get you here. So just on the off chance that you're the assassin, I'm going to kill you. But having that kind of dramatic moment at the end where I have two cards I'm picking from, do you live or do you die? Do I try and help you get to the end or do I kill you? And I chose to kill her. Luckily, it turned out she was the assassin and been plotting against me the whole game. It was just a really tense and dramatic moment. And I've not felt such highs and such drama in a game before, especially even a social deduction game. And I usually quite like social deduction games, but they usually kind of boil down to just a screaming session. In a two-player claustrophobic setting like this, oh, it's tense.
Okay, that's really interesting because social deduction is a really hard sell for me. Like if if you wanted me to play a social deduction game, you know that I'm going to be very skeptical. You know that I tend to not enjoy those games, especially ones that rely on a betrayal mechanic. You know, things like Battlestar Galactica, things like Dead of Winter. I'm not good at them, and I don't get a lot of joy out of the group element when it is a shouting match. And I don't know, sometimes I also feel like the betrayal isn't very satisfying often.
No.
Like
No.
when you win Dead of Winter as a betrayer and you go, yes, you all survived the colony or whatever, but I had a secret goal where I had to collect 2 apples and 1 tablet, and then I would win the game. Ha ha ha. What? That's not a betrayal. Like,
Yeah.
and I think one of the reasons why it's problematic is because the reason I love board games. Quince from Shut Up and Sit Down said, "What's great about board games, or what's great about when board games are great, is everybody cares so much equally about everything in the game, and that kind of is impossible when somebody secretly cares about some nonsense that is kind of detached from the rest of the game." Playing Nemesis as well does this. I've really disliked my plays. I've played it twice and I disliked both plays because I just feel like if we had all cared about, if it was just an interesting co-op game where we all equally cared about getting the aliens off a ship, that would be fun. And the fact that somebody at the end goes, aha, secretly I was playing a different game all along and I win because of this rule that none of you knew about. I kind of go, ugh.
Yeah.
But in your pitch there, you kind of, I'd play that. I'd give it a go.
Well, I think the reason it works so well for me, and I totally am with you. I'm not a fan of Dead of Winter. I'm not a fan of Nemesis. I'm not a fan of The Thing as well, which is a similar sort of thing. And even Dead of Winter is a great example because you're not sure if you've got an ally, an assassin or not in that one. If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
you can be cooperative. But in those games, the central mechanics, you're doing all this crunchy stuff and trying to work out all these kind of tactical considerations. In Mantis Falls is much simpler. You are trying to get from A to B. You're trying to get both of you from A to B, right? Just there to there. And so the journey is just one of interacting throughout the entire game. And that is the central focus of the game. It's not just put to the side. It's not just, okay, but we need to deal with the zombies now. We need to get several food now to, for whatever reason. It's the events every time are a test. Every single time it's like, okay, so how are we going to handle this test? And it feels like you're kind of constantly forced into conflict with each other and forced to rub against each other in a way that throws suspicion on you, but also it kind of makes you go, but they could just be trying their best here. It's hard to explain, but by putting that front and center, I think it really does just work. And it's also worth saying that the game comes with the best soundtrack I've ever heard with a game ever. It's a really mysterious, I think the setting as well really makes it work. It's this kind of noir sort of dark streets with flickering street lamps, everything about it just is so evocative and so immersive. It's actually the most immersed I think I've been in a theme in a long time. And it's just because it's such a simple and exciting game. And it's worth saying as well that it is emotionally exhausting. Like, both of us finished the game and we were just like, okay, we need to leave that a day now. We can't play this again, for a couple of days, because it takes a lot out of you. Like, it really does. It's the most similar I felt to in any other game was the Wretched. Like, it takes you to places, I think, emotionally that you don't normally access in a gaming experience. And to me, that's kind of one of the hallmarks of a transcendent and amazing game. So that would be what I want to talk about, and I guess I have.
That's excellent. What was the name of the game again, Scruffy?
It's called Mantis Falls.
And we'll put the BGG link down in the description.
A game of trust. And I'll tell you what, it's just worth saying as well, the components in it are wonderful. Even the baggies in the game are like little, I don't know what material you'd call them, like a kind of hemp or jute bags. And they're just wonderful. Like, yeah, they just to store your cards in. And for all of you out there, unlike me, who like sleeves, my copy at least came with just some complimentary card sleeves to sleeve your cards. Isn't that lovely?
That's lovely. Okay, that's a really good pick, and I think one of the reasons why it's a good pick is because the focus of the game is the interaction. And I think if we're going to talk about a game that is multiplayer, I think what you'd want to spend time talking about is the player interaction. And whilst you were talking there, I sort of had the revelation that what games do I most enjoy the player interaction from, and what games do I think have the most interesting multiplayer system? And then the answer became very obvious. I would want to talk about an 18xx game.
Yeah,
obviously.
of course.
If I had the opportunity, I would talk about an 18xx game. So I thought, okay, well, you can't just say that. You can't say I would talk about an 18xx game because there's like 200. Which one would it be? And I'd love if we had the opportunity to do a multiplayer thing for a while. I would love to really just get my teeth into 1830 Railways and Robber Barons. It's one of my favorites. I don't know if it still is my number one. And I was messaging you about this recently, how I sort of fallen into the trap that we talked about in our first top five, where I was like, oh, but I don't want to say 1830 is not my number one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the fact that it's been around for so long, this game is over 30 years old. It's been around for a very long time, and people have played it a lot. And it's the 18xx that I've played the most, so I'd feel most comfortable talking about it. I feel like there would just be so much to unpack. The way that 18xx games encourage player interaction, and player interaction, one move will have ripple effects around the table, around how the next player is going to take their turn, and the next player after that, and the next player after that. Like, when someone sells a share, one share, that will be a lost value for potentially every other player in the game.
Yeah.
And that's just one simple action. The ripple effects of where you choose to place your hex, what hex you choose when you're building your routes, the ripple effects of what companies you decide to float, when you decide to float them, based on the private auction and all of these other things. I remember the Derailed podcast back when they were making episodes, which is a fantastic podcast. It's called the Derailed 18xx podcast. Chris and Fred are really, really lovely people. They did an episode, an entire hour-long episode, an hour plus maybe, just on the private auction And the private auction in 1830 is the first thing you do in the game. It sort of makes it a little bit asymmetric every time. And the private company auction is about 5 minutes of gameplay, right?
Yeah.
It's about 5 minutes of gameplay, and they were talking about it for over an hour. And that's easy to do. Like, I could easily sit here with you now, Scruffy, and talk about all the different private companies, what their effects are, how much you'd ideally like to pay for them, where you are in seating position, who's bid on what at what point, all of these. And that's what I mean. Like, you can't just go into it and go, this is, well, you can actually in 1830 say that this is the best private company in the game, because there is one that is definitely the best, and it's very obvious to all players. That's kind of an interesting part of the design as well. But you can't just say you have to get this one to win, because it's all about what else has happened. You know, who else has done what, and what that then leaves you, and how that will then affect the next person. And the ripple effects, the player interactions in these 18xx games is just beyond anything I've played in any other game. And unlike what we've been talking about with randomness and how much we like it, these games are entirely deterministic, but impossible to predict how they're going to go. Even if you played it a million times, I've played games of 1830 where the two trains haven't ran ever. They rusted before they ran, and most of the companies have floated by the second stock round.
Well, the randomness is the other players, isn't it?
Well, it's the uncertainty, but it's not random. It's player driven. It hasn't happened by randomness. It's happened by player choice. So it's full of player uncertainty, and it's still full of uncertainty. But unlike what we've been, and this is another reason why I'd want to discuss it, an entirely deterministic game solo is kind of devoid of that delicious uncertainty. This is a great example of how this game is entirely deterministic and yet entirely uncertain. And you enjoy these games as well, Scruffy. I could imagine doing an episode on the private auction of 1830, an episode on the major companies, an episode on the route building, an episode on what order you should float things in, what there's just so much to the game, and it's what keeps me coming back over and over and over and over and over again. And there are probably more games that are slightly more of an interesting design than 1830 at the moment. I specifically am really, really enjoying 1849 at the moment, and have been for several years now. But yeah, 1830, I'd love to just have an excuse to talk to, and maybe even invite other people on who have been playing it for 30 years, because those people exist, and I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, good choice. Good choice. I mean, anyone who knows you would know that would be where you'd be wanting to take the multiplayer focus of the show, I'm sure.
Do you remember when we first started, I said, how about we make a spin-off show just based on 18xx, and we call it Always Platform 1?
Yay, brilliant.
It's not going to happen. I think that's kind of it for what I wanted to ask you in terms of the fun and interesting, the celebration of Always Player 1 ending.
Yeah, I think we've talked for a long time now, and we should probably, even though it's going to be heartbreaking for us, and I'm sure for you guys listening as well, I think we probably should wrap up and move on to the listener questions that we did ask for at the end of our last proper episode. I don't know about you, Norm, but I feel a bit,
I don't want to do it.
It's tough to move on, isn't it? It's tough to move on.
I don't want to do it. Let's not do it. So, what's the listener question this episode, Scruffy?
Well, let's do the ukulele riff that never had a chance to flourish, because why the hell not? So let's hear the ukulele riff to take us into the listener questions. Here we go. Here we are. We're at the listener question section of the show. Not. And
why
the question
me do this? Why are you making me?
I know. It's painful, isn't it?
It's too much, man.
So, final listener question for Always Player 1 then is, what did Always Player 1 mean to you?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, our first response was from Stop Somewhere Eric, and he says, literally everything in terms of becoming a solo gamer, learning about the hobby and what it involved, and even more generally, the idea of how far board games had come. Basically saved me finding it during the pandemic. Wow, what a lovely response. Thank you so much, Stop Somewhere Eric. I'm finding it hard to read these because it's just so heartfelt and touching. People who've listened before will know Stop Somewhere Eric started their own podcast
called the Stop Somewhere Podcast,
which I believe has ran for 4 episodes and is currently on a break. Check that out if you haven't checked it out already. It's really interesting. The episodes deal with some really interesting kind of mindfulness, meditative stuff. They kind of take a similar sort of approach to board games as we do, which is to look at them in a kind of broader context. But the places that Stop Somewhere It Tastes them are very different to where we go with games, and definitely worth a listen to. Some really interesting stuff there for sure. We'll leave a link to their podcast in the description.
And it's been a joy to get to know you, Eric. Thanks for all your support. Okay, shall I do the next one?
Yep.
We got Simon TC, who says, without you guys, I wouldn't have begun solo board gaming, I think. You've had so many great episodes on both good games, but also broader themes in gaming that I hadn't considered before. It has been a true joy listening to you. And of course, there is this Discord community. This is the only Discord I check daily and even try to be a little active in. And first of all, Simon, absolutely understand. Discord servers are overwhelming the way in which they function. So thank you for checking in every day, because I feel the same. You know, I know we made the Always Player One Discord, so I know it's a bit biased for me to say that because I have to moderate it. Well, actually, because of the nature of you lovely people, I don't really have to do any moderating. But, you know, it is, I do have a responsibility to read all of the posts, but I don't see it that way. I never even consider it that way. I think about going on the Always Play One Discord every day because I love doing it. I love interacting with you people. And, you know, I think I'm going to say this to every person, but it's been a joy to get to know you as well, Simon. So thank you. It's been lovely to meet you digitally, and all the support that you give us. It's amazing, and everything you guys contribute to community.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. That's a really lovely comment. And even though I'm not as active in the Discord in terms of commenting, I do read a lot of what's said. It's a really enriching experience looking over the Discord and different channels. There's so many different channels on there, and I totally get what you mean about the community, because I've tried to join other Discords for various other games, and I just mute them all. I don't look at any of them at all. Whereas the Always Player one, it's just got so much going on and so much interesting stuff to look at. It's great. Next up, we have Citizen Mono, who says, the podcast really opened me up more to solo gaming and introduced me to some great games. But perhaps more importantly, it led me to this community, which has been friendly and welcoming. I'm sorry to see the podcast go, but I'm glad we will all still be here, egging each other on to play and buy things and discuss everything under the sun. Thank you so much for that, Scruffy and Norm. And yeah, it's worth saying, like, if you listen to this episode in the far distant future, then the link to the Discord's in the description. Feel free to come along and say hello. I'm sure there'll still be people there egging each other on to buy and play games, as Citizen Mono said.
And it's been a joy to get to know you as well, Citizen Mono. Thank you. And Citizen Mono also does Twitch streaming of video games, and the link to Citizen Mono's Twitch channel is going to be in the description.
Okay, who have we got next, Norm?
Next up, we have Soronivo, who says, it's been great to hear a deeper perspective on games, and having 2 hosts really helped give a rounded view. Good luck for the future. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Soronivo. I feel like I could talk a massive response to each and every one of these, but I kind of want to get through as many as we can. So just going to say a massive thank you to that, Soronivo. And yeah, I totally agree. It's been really lovely having Norm as my co-host. I love you, Norm.
Oh, I love you, Scruffy. I don't, stop it, stop it.
Okay, next up is our third...
Before we move on, it's been a joy to get to know you as well, Soronivo.
Okay, next up we have our third co-host, Dog Mantra, or Kendall, who has appeared on a bunch of episodes, as we've already mentioned.
Yeah, Kendall's like Gunther, right? He's like the...
That's just rude.
I didn't mean it like that. I mean like, the 5th Beatle, the 3rd Always Player One host.
Right, you are. I see Kendall as very much an integral part of the show. I'm sure you do too, even though you called them Gunther. No.
And they're our best friend, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, let's see what they have to say, and then we'll decide. So Kendall says, I suspect what Always Player One means to me is a little different to other listeners. As someone who has been on the show, I will cherish the opportunity you all gave me to talk about my little game on an early episode, as well as the other times I've been involved with recording. I've always wanted to do a podcast, but never had the energy or time to run one. So it was a wonderful opportunity. And their little game they mentioned there is the Golden Geek nominated Rollway Station. So check that out if you haven't already. There's a version 2 out of the game as well now, which we also discussed in one of my top 5 episodes. And as a friend, I will cherish the fact that for 18 months or so, I was able to listen to my good friends just talking and having a good time. And the fact that so many other people were enjoying that too. Yep, definitely best friend. Thank you, Kendall.
Yeah, Kendall. I don't. Yeah, I can't put into words how much Kendall means to me. They're an
No.
awesome person,
And like, if you're not sure who Kendall is, and this is your first time kind of like hearing that name, check out the Christmas quiz episode.
oh my goodness, I think our best ever episode.
They just did an impromptu quiz for us, and they just nailed it. So, oh yes, Kendall. Who's next, Norm?
We have Rob, the game guy. Rob says, there is too much to say about Always Player One that I cannot hope to fit into one Discord blurb. As cheesy as it is, the most valuable thing to me has been the friends I made in this community. If it wasn't for Always Player One, I wouldn't have met Banana Republic and Comrade Boris. Did you all know we play games together like all the time? And we're even talking now about an in person gaming meetup in 2022. On top of that, I got exposed to so many different games, not just solo games, but all types of games, RPGs included. It broadened my horizons, and now I'm so deep in the hobby, there is no going back. Thanks for all the great episodes, and most importantly, for creating this community. Now, Rob has already gone on since writing this, has posted about where they're all meeting for their game meetup, and they've got this like like house sort of cabin thing that they're all renting, and they're like playing games for days in together.
It's just living the dream, isn't it?
Living the dream. And that's awesome because they all met through the Discord only.
What a wonderful thing to come out of the show. That's so cool.
And Rob also has a really cool Instagram account as well. It's at Rob the Game Guy. You should check it out. It's really cool.
So next up we have
it's been a joy to get to know you, Rob.
Oh, we didn't say that for Kendall. It's been a joy to get to know you, Dog Mantra.
We knew Kendall. We knew.
Next up, we have Comrade Boris, who says, honestly, it is difficult to explain how much Always Player One means to me. As Rob, the game guy, mentioned, I've made new friends here. Also, the many good times I've had in this Discord, whenever I write here, couldn't express nor would do justice to how grateful I am. Thank you, at Norm and Scruffy.
Yeah, Comrade Boris is a cool person.
Yeah.
I've actually played some live, not face to face, but digital 18xx games with Comrade Boris and Banana Republic, and yeah, both awesome people. Really, really cool. And it's been a joy to get to know Comrade Boris.
Who's up next, Norm?
Up next is Attila, who says, I am designing my own board game, not because I am a game designer, nor am I any good at it. I'm doing this because of Always Player One. I entered this amazing hobby because of your podcast. Board gaming is amazing. Come across some very good lads, had some very good conversations here and chatted a lot. Also, this is the only Discord server where I only find friends. You two created an amazing community here. Thanks for this, Norm, and thanks for this, Scruffy. And then they put in like what is traditional.
It's clearly a music note, so you're going to have to sing this one, Norm.
Yeah, it's like a football chant, like quite an English football chant. It says, I'm always playing one till I die. I'm always playing one till I die.
Love it.
That's my football voice. Just like that one.
It was perfect. I can't believe it's taken this long to hear it.
And it says, see you all at the next GameCon, which is a really good point. You know, if you're going to a GameCon and it's in the UK, obviously, let us know, because if we're going there, I will absolutely make an effort to come and say thank you for listening, of course, and sit down and maybe play some games. You know, who knows?
Oh, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
And it's been a joy to get to know Attila as well.
Another little one from Stop Somewhere Eric, who says, seconded on the design part 2. I wouldn't have even known it was really an option to do it if it hadn't been for the railway station episode, obviously just mentioned. So that's awesome to hear that that was an inspiration there. And then we have Banana Republic, who says, it all started with me trying to find out more about solo board gaming online, feeling self-conscious about how strange this hobby would feel being at the table alone. I found a post about Always Pair 1 in Reddit and got hooked on the Friday episode, then followed by Mage Night. I listened to the Mage Night episode several times because I love how Norm's and Scruffy's energy bounce off each other, their incredible conversation and love for these experiences. It just got better from there. Whenever they recommended a game, I would not hesitate to follow along because their genuine discussion made it very transparent whether a game would be for me or not. I always appreciated that. Thanks to you, I have so many adventures. The best part, though, has been this community that has grown here in Discord. As Rob the Game Guy and Comrade Boris have mentioned, we have made great friends over here. I would have missed out on so much if I had not been here. Thank you, Always Player One. You've been an important part of my life for the past 1+ years. You've helped me in the past year more than you'll imagine, and I'm grateful for it. What a lovely message.
Yeah, it's just touching, isn't it?
It's just so much. Like it's really it's kind of hard to hear all this and to but I get it. Like I see the Discord, I see the way that people talk to each other on there and the respect. And I just want to say, like, you know, this is so much down to you, Norm, and the constant positivity that you put out on there. I mean, the episodes that we do are obviously wonderful, and the show I am immensely proud of, but the Discord, I just want to really signpost now and say a massive round of applause to you for the amount of positivity you've put in there and the thing that you've constructed there. It wouldn't exist without everything you've done for it. So clap, clap, clap.
That means a lot. That really does. Even when like the division of labor was always really clear for the podcast, we recorded together, we liked games together, but Scruffy did the editing and I did the social side of things. And even Banana Republic's been a listener, like as you know, right from the beginning. Friday was our second episode. They've been a listener right from the beginning, and they've been a huge part of the support and very vocal about how much they enjoy the show and a genuine friend of both of ours. But even reading that they found the show for a Reddit post, I was like, yes, that was me. I did that.
Yeah, I feel like I remember, like I have this kind of fuzzy memory of, I'd have to scroll back in the first general comment. I feel like Banana was one of the first people to come into the Discord and really make it what it is. Like, you know, I'm giving Norm, I'm obviously giving you the mad props here that you deserve. But, you know, people like Banana and all you kind of first adopters really set the tone for the Discord. And it's only as positive and inclusive and vibrant as it is because you guys came in with such positive energy. Like I've said before in the show, we were expecting trolls. We were expecting, you know, we're putting ourselves out there on the internet. We're going to get people coming and going, oh, you know, it's the shit. But that didn't happen. Of course it didn't happen because we were lucky enough to be graced with you guys. I know that sounds a bit sycophantic, is that the word? But I mean it.
Yeah, and I absolutely couldn't agree more. Like I could post on there until I'm blue in the face, and I do. But the only reason it's taken off is because you all interact with it so much and you've all built something that you can all be proud of. And long may it continue. Long, and I mean really long, because it's just habit now. I just look at my phone and I'm like, what's going on in the Discord? And it's always interesting. It's always fun. And I still get a kick. For you, Scruffy, this is something we didn't really talk about. Just like the responsibility of being a content creator. It wasn't something that weighed very heavy with me because it just didn't. But it was always, when someone says that they bought a game because you enjoyed it, that's a weird feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's one that's kind of a responsibility that, you know, I said it didn't bear very heavy on me. But when someone says something like that, there's always that pressure, like, oh, are they going to have the same experience I did? So I can't control that. I can't sit at the table with them. But it's always so satisfying when someone says, I loved your episode. I've now bought the game and I've also had a good time. That's awesome. You know, it's so good.
Yeah.
I described ourselves today on the Discord as Sean Tompkins' sales division.
No, yeah, and that's happened a lot in previous episodes. In the listener questions, we've had people say, "Oh, really glad you did an Iron Swan episode or whatever episode," and because I've got into it now, and I didn't think I would. And people that like Banana Republic, for example, who've kind of very much followed along the same arc as us and gone experienced the games as we've experienced the games. It's really nice to have that kind of shared understanding there that we know, yeah, we did it too, and yeah, I'm glad you did too. It's really
And you
cool.
have done it too. You deserve to be sat here recording this episode as much as we do. Like in an ideal world, I'd want you all on here talking about the experience that you've gone through, because you've all come along for the ride with us, and appreciate it. It's been a joy to get to know you, Banana Republic.
Well, let's have someone else join the ride, Norm. Who's next?
So the next one's from Tigmic, who said, Always Player One became my favourite board gaming podcast because of the rapport between the hosts, the great guests, and the community you built behind it. You enhanced the hobby a lot in such a short time. I wish you all the best and look forward to remaining part of the Always Player One family on Discord. Yes, and that touches on something that I feel really proud of. One thing that I feel really proud of is I kind of feel like in our own little corner of the internet, the hobby is a different space in that corner. The hobby is different to when it started than when this podcast started as a result of our episodes and our community. And that is something that I'm so proud of.
Yeah, I mean, there's always somewhere we can go now, like, and share a solo experience we've had, like, and it will be received warmly, and that's just lovely. And it's nice to know other people have that as well, like a platform on which to talk about solo games. Like, I mean, obviously we've had it with the show itself, like we can really luxuriate in doing a big old episode and talk about everything that interests about it. But it's a platform, that the Discord, where anyone can rock up and be like, here's my playthrough of whatever solo game, and here's how it felt to play it or whatever.
Before we end the show, I really want to actually, because we've never done it, I really want to talk about the different channels that are in the Discord. So anybody who's not on there, I really want you to know what you are missing out on. Now, I also want to touch on something Tigmic did for me, which was really, really sweet. So I just want to take a little bit of time to do that. I know this episode is the longest episode we've ever done, but whatever, it's the last episode. Tigmic, for Christmas, sent me a board game for Christmas. And the game that they sent me was Ambush. Ambush is a World War II squad level game that is based on narrative. It's a narrative focused game. And I've wanted this game for so long, but it's really hard to find because it's been out of print for like 20 years. And Tigmic just, on a punt, said, I think Norm will like this, and sent it from Canada to the UK for Christmas for me. I was astounded. Like, it's the best present I got all Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, the generosity from our listeners who joined, our patrons who sent us games. There've been multiple listeners who sent us games, and I won't embarrass them all right now by listing them and what they bought us, but it's been overwhelming. I can't believe that people would just be that kind and lovely, and we appreciate every single patron, every single gift we got from it. And I'll right at the end of the episode, I'll say what happened with the Patreon money, just to close us out here, because I think it's quite a cool little thing.
So yeah, thank you, Tigmig. It's been a joy to get to know you. Who's next, Scruffy?
Next up is Chris is okay. Chris is okay says, similar story to many here, I think, at least in some ways. I got engaged with solo gaming just before the pandemic, and my interest took an even stronger hold in mid-2020. I had been listening to a few solo board game podcasts to get my bearings and learn about the hobby, but nothing caught me as much as Always Player One. I think it was more the casual, friendly tone and personal touch. It's not an easy thing to try and put into a recording and capture, but it worked for Always Player One. I used your advice and perspective to inform what I explored. And then I joined the Discord, and it's a wonderful community of folks and a delightful wormhole.
Yes.
My wallet hated this podcast and continues to hate this server, but my heart appreciates the adventure greatly. I mean, yeah.
What a comment.
It is. I couldn't agree more. Like, I can imagine that coming into it, it would be a bit overwhelming, but like you say, we'll go over at the end all the different channels, because it is a wonderful wormhole.
It really is. Chris is another member who I also follow on Instagram, and Chris has a really, really cool Instagram. So go and check that out. Yeah, it's been a joy to get to know you, Chris.
Okay, who's next?
The next one is from Kelly LMCL, who says, "My brother introduced me to solo gaming when we last visited. Well, I played Wingspan with him, and he told me that it could also be played solo, so I went from there. He also recommended this podcast as a way to learn more about solo gaming. I'm glad to still have access to the Discord as I continue to look for games to enjoy. Thanks and take care."
Well, that's lovely.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And also, the brother was Tigmic.
There we go.
There we go.
That's really cool. And I can second an enthusiasm for Wingspan now, having played it myself.
And it's been a joy to get to know Kelly as well. The next one's from Elio Doloro, who says, "It meant deep and honest discussions of board games from two people I enjoy listening to and whose opinions I value. It means that I have a giant pile of Ironsworn stuff on my table in my fun room, which I'm getting to. And it was a nice part of a long drive I make weekly for family reasons. There aren't too many spaces for board game discussion, as just about everyone else wants to slap a review on everything. I wish you both well, and thank you for many hours of entertainment, even if I don't always agree with you, Scruffy."
Well, yeah, there's no accounting for taste, but I totally get it. I'm quite the opinionated asshole sometimes. I can. I'll be the first to admit.
Oh my goodness. I love that they single you out specifically.
Yeah, like they always agree with you, Nom, just not always agree with me.
Oh, that's brilliant.
No, I love it. I love it, and it makes me happy to hear that you can enjoy the show despite my garbage opinions.
Well, we don't always agree with each other, right?
No, that's it.
But if they always agree with me, then they'll agree that the disagreements enrich the show.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
It's been a joy to get to know Elio Doloro as well.
So that's all from the Discord there. I just want to say one last time how much all of that means to me, listening to it all now. You know, I've read through a few of them for the show as well, and it was I was genuinely welling up. It's really, really means the world to me to hear all of that. You folks.
We also have one from Mattia S on the email who said, "What did Always Play One mean to me? It has been a great pleasure to listen to your episodes with both valid high points and criticisms of the games you have talked about. The positive atmosphere that you always maintained has been greatly appreciated, whether I've listened during gardening, driving to work, or the occasional jog. You have opened my eyes to some unexpected games like Railway Station and Ironsworn. Although I now have to admit, I still haven't looked into either of them, which is a tiny bit of a shame. I have enjoyed every minute with you, and I wish you the very best for the future." That's from Mateus, and they're in Sweden. Thank you, Mateus. Obviously, I haven't got to know you as you're not over on the Discord, but it will be a joy to get to know you if you do decide to come over.
We had another email from Michael Fenton who says, "Hi Norman Scruffy. It's been almost a month since your episode announcing the end of your podcast, but I just got the chance to listen to it this week. I miss listening to you." Yeah, so good job we did leave it so late. Thank you so much for all of the great episodes, discussions and topics. The thing that really struck me about your podcast was the warm, open, enthusiastic spirit with which you approached every game you discussed. It was really special. So many reviewers get caught up in all the negatives about the game and focus on assessing the game instead of just exploring it. I always enjoy how you approach the game as players and focus on what your engagement with each game brought you. Thanks for that.
And as it's a bit of a long one, we'll share the responsibility. It says, "The other thing that really impressed me about your podcast was the episode when you, Norm, announced that you had to take a break from the podcast to deal with some mental health issues. As someone who struggles with these issues myself, I completely understand and applaud your decision to clarify what you need to be healthy and then act on that knowledge. And then to be open about it in a public setting was impressive. I found it so hard to open with others about my struggles, but I've also had some positive experiences when my opening up encourages others to open up about their struggles too. We live in challenging times, and feeling that you're alone with what you're feeling and experiencing only makes things harder. So thanks for your bravery and openness about it on the podcast. It was much appreciated."
they go on to give us some suggestions there about future episodes, and they end with, anyhow, thank you so much for all of the episodes of your podcasts. I'm not caught up listening yet, so I have many unheard episodes to enjoy. I wish you both lots of success in whatever life has in store for you next, and lots of continued fun with solo board games. I'm not much of a Discord user, but maybe I'll finally get on board and engage a bit with the community. Thanks the best for everything. All the best, Michael. Hope you do, Michael.
Yeah.
And thank you for a lovely message.
Yeah, I've had quite a few messages like that with people saying that it was, brave of me to. I didn't feel it at the time, Just being honest, it's just the nature of the show, I think, and the nature of you guys being so welcoming. It was easy to share, and yeah, if you are going through something like that that's similar, you are obviously not alone, and it's not easy to manage your mental wellness. And yeah, I hope that you're all well, and if you're not, we're here. If you're on the Discord, don't hesitate to DM me. I won't name any names, but there's quite a few Discord listeners who, if they're going through a tough time, I'm happy for them to message me personally, because that's what we're all here for. There's another one from John Powell who says, "Hey Norman Scruffy, congrats on a great podcast. I came late to the table, only discovering you recently. What does always play one mean to me? Deep dives, specifically Mage Knight deep dives. Searching for Mage Knight was how I found your episode 3, and I will always equate your show to those 2 awesome episodes. Insightful, enthusiastic, detailed. Cheers. John in Idaho."
Well, thank you so much, John. That's lovely to hear. And I think that's our last comment. I can't see any more in the email at the moment. It's kind of chocked up with spam. So if we've missed your message among all that spam, I'm really sorry. But yeah, I'm really glad that we got through all of those, and everyone, I hope you're glad to have had a chance to say your final thoughts to the episode. I'm really glad to have heard them. It really means the world to me, and I'm sure it does to you too, Norm.
Yeah, it's emotional listening, and I don't know how much fun all of that was for you guys to listen to, right? But it was important for us that no matter how long it took, we were going to read them out, because it's a very personal question that we asked of you, and you all dug deep and bore your hearts to us, and we were not going to miss a single person.
Yeah, it would have felt a bit wrong, I think, to end the episode without getting around to everyone. So I am very sorry if we did miss anyone in the email spam.
But yeah, I think that's kind of everything I wanted to get out of this episode. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Scruffy?
My last thing I want to say to kind of end the show is I started Always Player One, and I said it specifically in the episode that I didn't own a copy of Feast for Odin. Well, guess what? I've put the Patreon money, spent it on straight away as soon as we wrapped up and decided we were closing up the show. Scruffy now has a copy of Feast for Odin.
Yay!
Hey! If nothing else came from this, I mean, I'm happy.
Yeah, we always spent the Patreon money on the show, obviously, on stuff for the show. But when it ended, we had a little bit left over, and we were like, let's buy ourselves retirement presents. And we both bought a game each, which was really fun.
Yeah.
I bought a copy of Eldritch Horror, and I have my own personal story about Eldritch Horror, because it was the first hobby board game that I purchased. I took it home, and my partner went, "There's absolutely no way I'm learning that. It looks too complicated." So I took it back and got Pandemic instead. But now I finally own a copy of Eldritch Horror, and you know what? It's not that complicated, right?
So I just want to say again, a massive thank you to the patrons for making that happen. Like, I don't know if I'd ever have got around to getting a copy of the game myself, and I've played it to death since getting it. So it's a big deal for me and for my collection, and I'm always going to look on it really fondly because it's going to remind me of the show. I know that's a bit of a self-indulgent thing to throw out there at the end of the show, but I wanted to end where we started.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thank you to everyone who's ever written in on a show or responded to a listener question. Could you imagine if no one did, right? If no one responded to a listener question, can you imagine how just rubbish the show would be?
It wouldn't have been what it was.
No.
That's for certain. It wouldn't have carried on as long as it did. It wouldn't have been the thing that we both enjoyed. And, every single comment on our Discord, I swear, was saying about the Discord, right? Like, I'm thinking back now, I can't remember one that didn't. Like, the community has been the real triumph of the show. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And who knows where we'll be in the future. Who knows? Keep an eye on Discord. Any future projects that me and Norm do will obviously be mentioned on there. I look forward to seeing all your adventures that you all get up to
Oh, I do
on the
have one
Discord.
final question.
Go on.
How closed is the door now for like future episodes? Like, because it's over now, right? It's over.
Mm-hmm.
But many listeners have made it clear that a reunion would be welcomed. How open or closed is that door for you?
I think it's always tempting to say, "Oh, well, you never know," but I think, it's worth saying that this is the end of the show now,
Yes.
and it's important to have that closure and have that expectation going forward.
Yeah.
Who knows? There might be times where we just have to talk about an episode, a game that we've experienced, and we decide to whip out the old recording gear and upload it. But as far as I'm concerned, my future projects that I'm thinking of doing are not always player one, and I don't know what will happen. So you never know in the future, but I think it's best to assume that this is the end of the show.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for getting this far into the episode. Jesus.
Yeah, if you're still listening now, massive love to you, and thank you so much for sticking with us for as long as you have, and even just in this episode.
I think that's it, though. I think we have to go now.